Welcome to what is the first in a series of introductory lessons related to the time value of money. My name is Brent Pritchard. I teach college finance courses, and I'm here to help you grasp this all-important concept. I'm also an author and the co-founder of Box Home Press, LLC, which publishes this content. But first, I'm a recovering perfectionist. There, we got that out of the way. Now, I'm joking, but this is ultimately for your benefit. These videos are unedited, real and uncut, and in the style that I teach. So welcome to my classroom. In this introductory series, you'll be learning the what and the why related to the time value of money, and ultimately how to apply the mathematics of finance. At the time of this recording, there are 28 videos planned for this introductory unit. That means that you can grasp the concept of the time value of money in less than a month if you're committed to one or more lessons a day. It's that easy. Now you might be thinking, a month? Isn't this just the idea that $1 in the hand in the present is worth more than $1 in the future? And that's true, but my experience in the classroom has provided firsthand evidence that even the most dedicated students can stumble or struggle when applying the mathematics of finance. So sit back, relax. It's really not that hard to learn the hard skill that is the mathematics of finance, and enjoy a fun new take on this age-old concept. And after you've done that, please consider telling your friends about this channel, TVM Rules, and the book, Would Your Boomerang Return, also known as the Boomerang book, that made it possible. I always start class with a quote. So here we go. The quote of the lesson is, what we, finance professionals, do is just numbers and words. Clayton John was a legend in the commercial real estate industry, where I worked for 22 years, count them, 22 years to the day, before starting to teach full time. He was known to say this quote quite often, and we're going to be taking his words of wisdom and applying them to this unit. Before we can work out the numbers, applying the mathematics of finance, we first need to talk about the time value of money using none other than, you guessed it, words. We start with the namesake of this channel, the TVM rules. It might be hard to believe, but before the publication of Would Your Boomerang Return, there wasn't what I would call a set list of TVM rules or time value of money rules. These are simple rules, but don't think that simplicity is the absence of complexity. Far from it. There's a lot going on here. In addition to being original and bare bones, the TVM rules that are based on the mnemonic indifferent also provide the blueprint and the audible aid for the three-step systematic approach. The TVM rules provide the source code for the three-step systematic approach, which, as you'll see, is applied using the visual aid that is the TVM wallet. We waste no time, and we'll get around to applying the mathematics of finance later in this lesson. Okay, I've got a true or false question for you. There are more places to invest your money than just checking and savings accounts, money market instruments, and bonds that return interest. True it is. Okay, another one. A nominal or simple interest rate can also be thought of as a false interest rate, since the word false is the same thing as simple or nominal and implies that the effects of compounding have not been considered. Once again, true. This is why it drives me crazy when I hear people talking about compound interest. Now you know why. Because there are a spectrum of investment alternatives, not all of which pay, fill in the blank, interest. In fact, terminology is likely a root cause for why so many dedicated students stumble or struggle when it comes to grasping this all-important concept. The catch-all term is the true investment yield. Now we move on from a true or false question to fill in the blank. Think about the time value of money rule number 2, TVM rule number 2. It's a time value of money no-no to fail to correspond the time span in between periods or payments on the timeline, that's lowercase n, and the time span of the true investment yield, which is denoted by lowercase I. In other words, you must match the timing of the timeline with the corresponding true investment yield. So let's do an example. Here we go. I'm going to turn the pen on and we'll start writing. Let's say you've got a timeline, and when in doubt, draw a timeline. That was taught to me early in my career. The words still hold true. When in doubt, draw a timeline. So we're going to do just that. Let's say we're dealing with this timeline. I'll show you my artistic abilities. I'm joking. Although I've always had a creative side. And what a lot of people don't know about me is I was originally an art major in college. So here we go. We've got a timeline with 2 time periods. We could call this a total investment period that includes 2 time periods. But what we have here for the time span in between time period markers is, let's fill in the blank, and you would be given this information, or you could determine it if you've got the flexibility to do so. And we'll be working with that kind of situation later in this unit. But let's fill in the blank. What is that time span? Let's say that the time span is monthly. There we go. We've got an M for monthly. Let's try that again. M for monthly. So only a true monthly investment yield would work. What if we were dealing with an annual time period between period markers? I mean, aren't all interest rates expressed in annual terms? Of course not. That's another thing that drives me crazy. But let's say that the time span in between these period markers was a year. Then the only true investment yield that would work, we could also call it a rate, but we could shorten it and just say yield. The only true investment yield that would work is a true annual investment yield in that case. Okay, so let's move on. One of my favorite interview questions used to be, how do you describe the time value of money in your own words? Believe it or not, I used to ask that question. So did a colleague of mine. That question has now been replaced with one word, the mnemonic indifferent. This one word with its 2 main components will help you remember the time value of money rules. But that's not all. Remember what I said about simplicity not being the absence of complexity? Time value of money rule number 1, TVM rule number 1, relates to time. TVM rule number 2 relates to value. TVM rule number 3 relates to money. And while that's pretty cool, we can only talk about math for so long. Applying the mathematics of finance is where the rubber meets the road. In the third and final take on the time value of money rules, you can see that each of the TVM rules relate to one or more of the 5 primary TVM financial calculator inputs. Yes, financial calculators are the tools of the trade. I've heard all the arguments, but you can't save the data, you can't share it with others. I'm not saying we didn't use spreadsheet software, but I'm just saying, trust me, the FinCalc is still the FinTech professionals are reaching for. Why do we need these original TVM rules? Because rules are rules, not guidelines. They provide a kind of roadmap and the most active ingredient to the solution for the problem of what? Analysis paralysis. I can't tell you how many times students have told me that they understand the time value of money until a real world situation is introduced. And then I see that deer in the headlights look. It's not a good look. The Boomerang book includes the first of its kind user manual for the mathematics of finance, which is organized into sections typically found in an actual user manual. At the heart of this section of the book is the TVM formula. The purpose of this introductory unit is to help you grasp the time value of money like the back of your hand. Just like a hand has 5 digits, there are 5 components to the TVM formula. In one way or another, all of the information in these introductory lessons will relate back to the TVM formula. The mnemonic and audible aid in different helps you remember the TVM rules and also to step through the 3-1-2 warm-up routine, the ultimate purpose of which is to determine the true investment yield, or I, that you'll be using to work out the math. Before too long, we'll be warming up and working out the math using the TVM wallet and the 3-step systematic approach. If you're following along, you may have noticed that we skipped over the whole 3-1-2 warm-up routine, and that was on purpose. The 3-1-2 warm-up routine relates to manipulating the investment yield such that the true investment yield matches how you're telling time on the timeline. It takes a little more time than we have in this opening video to do that effectively, but don't worry, we'll get to that in due time. And you might even have fun manipulating the investment yield, believe it or not. Imagine that. You'll see what I mean when we get to that lesson, which presents yet another new take that is memorable and easy to apply. The TVM wallet that we see here on this slide is a visual aid. It also relates back to the TVM rules. Moving counterclockwise around the TVM wallet, the first window in the upper left-hand corner relates to rule number 1, TVM rule number 1. The bottom window on the left side of the wallet relates to TVM rule number 2. And the third window on the right side of the wallet relates to TVM rule number 3. Okay, let's work through an example. We're going to draw another timeline. How about that? Let's say, and visualization is huge. The Olympians, they do this. Lots of other successful people, they visualize. Anthony Robbins, Tony Robbins, he's got a morning visualization routine that he calls, I think it's morning priming. Visualization is huge. And we're going to do a little bit of visualization here as part of this, using this visual aid that is the TVM wallet. So in the first window, we are going to be drawing the timeline. So let's say that we have let's put 0 here. This is now, it could be now, it could be today. It doesn't always have to be at time period 0. But we're going to draw a timeline with one time period. Let's say that you are considering investing $10,000 at time period 0. And you're trying to determine the future value at the end of the first period here. I'm going to circle this because this is what we're looking for, the future value. Okay, so we visualized what we have here. There's a $10,000 investment or a deposit, and we're trying to figure out what's the future value one period from now of that $10,000 invested at the beginning of the investment horizon. It could be today, it could be now, but it doesn't have to be today or now. There's nothing in the time value of money that says time period 0 is now or the present. So if we were to invest $10,000 at the beginning of this investment period, that's a better way to say it, what's that going to be worth for a value, a future value, at the end of this investment period? So we're going to complete the time value of money wallet. We've got our lowercase I, our uppercase N, and then we've got payment, PV, payment, PMT, that represents an even or level annuity, and the third kind of payment, which is the future value. For PV and FV, those are single or lump sums. For PMT, that's an even or level annuity. We'll get to that later in this unit. So here we fill it out. We've got 10,000 for PV. That is our initial investment. That is the single, better said, a single or lump sum investment or deposit. We've got 0 for payment. Why? Because there's no level about this $10,000 payment. It happens once. Did you hear my text tone in the background. That was kind of timely, wasn't it? The coins were falling. Probably needed to turn that off. My apologies. And we're trying to solve for the future value. Now, if you were given let's say that this period of time, let's draw this out. Let's fill in the blank like we did last time. Let's say that this period of time, it doesn't need to be a year. Remember, interest rates, they're not always stated in annual terms. Let's fill in the blanks here. The blank. Let's say that this period of time between 0 on the time period, on the timeline, and 1 on the timeline is 3 months or a quarter. Then only a true quarterly investment yield is going to work. And what if we're told, or we solve for the true quarterly investment yield, and we determine that it's 1.5075%? I probably should clean that up a little bit. Let me clean it up a little bit. 1.5075%. There we go. That looks a little better. We've got a 1 here for N because the total investment period is 1 period, which happens to be 3 months or a quarter, and we solve for the future value. When we input these values into, you guessed it, the financial calculator, for the future value, we get $10,150.75. Let's not forget about the 75 cents. So there we go. This is how we solve or answer a question. There's my phone. It's actually fitting for this first video. I'll remember to turn it off in future lessons. This is how we answer a real-world time value of money, not problem, question. This is the solution to the problem of analysis paralysis. We are answering questions here. We don't want these to be problems. Problems, not good. We want to answer questions, and this is how we do it. Okay, so notice that the time span in between period markers from 0 to 1 on this super short timeline, it's 3 months or quarters. Okay, now let's change it up. Let's say that you had 3 period markers on this timeline, and you were considering investing or making a deposit of $10,000 today, and you wanted to know what's the future value of those monies deposited today after 3 periods, when each period is a month. So notice how you still have a quarter in this timeline, but now we need to fill in the blanks here and say, what is this period of time? Now this is a month. Okay, so only a true what? Monthly investment yield or interest rate, if you really want to call it that, works. That's the only I that works here. If you were given the true monthly investment yield, or you solved for the true monthly investment yield like we're going to be doing later in this unit, and you determine that the true monthly investment yield was 0.5%, then you could solve, N changes to 3, you could solve for the future value, and guess what? It's the same amount. $10,150.75. Do you see what I mean by indifferent being such an important word? It's the one word I think about when I think about the time value of money and applying the mathematics of finance. So that's a wrap. If you liked what you learned in this lesson, please consider telling your friends about this channel, TVM Rules, and the book that made it possible. If you haven't purchased your copy yet, all the important information on this all-important topic is gift-wrapped within the cover of the book, Would Your Boomerang Return? So until next time, enjoy the gift that is the present.